Welcome everybody. I might start proceedings, Kevin. It's now 1 o'clock, and just to start off by saying good afternoon to all Rotarians and guests. My name is Reg Smith. I'm the MC for today's meeting of the Rotary Club of Melbourne. Please note that I'll mute your microphones for the duration of the presentations. Questions and comments via the chat function are available throughout the presentation. I hope everyone's charged their glasses, mugs, coffee cups, or whatever other vessel you choose to drink from. And I'd like now to call on Phil Cornish, who will give thanks today, after which the loyal toast will be given by President Kevin. Over to you, Phil.
All right. Greetings. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Nod.
Yep, good. Well, in happier times, one of the things I would do for enjoyment in Melbourne would be to wander around our parks. And I'm one of those people who actually reads what's on the various inscriptions on the base of statues. There's a little reserve called Gordon Reserve that many of you may or may not know at the top end of Collins Street. And the reserve is named for Adam Lindsay Gordon, who died in 1870. And chiselled into the sandstone underneath is a line from his most famous poem, which went, "Life is mainly froth and bubble." In shortened form, it was still used as rhyming slang in suburban cricket when your side lost a couple of wickets. I actually didn't know where the phrase came from until I read the chiselled stone. But the whole stanza is, "Life is mainly froth and bubble, and two things stand like stone. Kindness in another's trouble, and courage in your own." And so in these strange times that we find ourselves in, much of what we used to consider important must surely now be thought of as froth and bubble. And I hope that in this time we can still be kind for another's troubles and have courage in our own. And for those workers at the front line of a pandemic, must surely be giving thanks for their kindness and courage. And I note that the calendar is sneaking up fast on me, and I realise tonight is also the Jewish Passover. And so, as I understand it, it's a festival in part of liberation. And our confinement is surely a very benign captivity, but I must say, I will be giving great thanks for that Liberation Day when we can go freely around the parks of Melbourne again. And for that, I express my gratitude.
Superbly said, Philip. Thank you for your contribution. And I'm very pleased to be able to propose a toast to Rotary and Australia. So Australia and Rotary International.
Australia, Rotary International.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to welcome you to the 36th meeting of the Rotary year. In fact, our 4,836th meeting of our Rotary Club, and our 4th online meeting in our 99-year history. Today, we're broadcasting from various locations with the hope that once again, the technology will be kind as planned. Questions to the speaker can be typed in the chat to MC Reg during the presentation. And a reminder, if you do have any difficulties, we are recording and loading the address as a podcast on our club website in a day or so. Our guest speakers today make up a reporting panel on Rotary bushfire response. Our club members include President-elect Marion Macleod, who will be our moderator, Jim Orchard, Bob Glindeman, and District Governor-elect of our adjoining district 9820, Mark Humphreys, with the topic bushfire recovery, Rotary's response to the other tragedy of 2020. Could I ask everyone to nod in acclamation as we welcome our guest speakers and panel today? Good, a lot of nodding and a little waving there. In relation to our fighting fund, that was an outcome of a terrific address by our member Hugh Bucknell a couple of weeks ago. We're ready to launch that, and members will certainly get some information via their emails in the next 24 hours. The fighting fund has been put together and has been led not only by Hugh, but also by our Vice President Marion, Cynthia Edgell, and ably assisted by incoming Vice President Chris Stillwell. We're looking at supporting our members and supporting those involvements we have with our partners in delivering humanitarian service. And to that end, the group captains met via Zoom meeting last week, as chaired by Captain of Groups Phil Endersby, to then go back to their group members and see how they're doing, how they're faring, what help might they need, can we help them to get onto Zoom, and the like. And so the feedback there will resonate, and we'll be able to identify areas of concern. In member news, our honorary member Jill Hibben's husband Lex passed away last Friday, and we have passed on our condolences on behalf of the club. The notice that was published states, a celebration of Lex's life will be held at a later date when his family and friends can give him a proper farewell. Our heart goes out to Jill, and certainly members who know Jill can contact her accordingly. It is certainly a challenging time, and each week, this being our 4th online meeting, each week we can say more and more about how much of a challenge it is. And the question that is so often asked is, when is this going to end? And no one is quite sure. But what is very clear is that we're all learning to embrace some new technology. We're learning other ways of doing what we're doing, and we're probably learning a lot more about those in our community who really are hurting. And certainly we had the plea the other day from our member Sue Barton in that regard. Today our focus turns to the other tragedy of 2020, and I'm very pleased to be able to introduce our guest speaker panel, and in doing so hand the meeting over to President-elect Marion Macleod. Marion, well, we're in your good hands. Marion, by the way, I must mention, is our representative on the District 9800 Bushfire Recovery Response Committee, and Marion has had a number of meetings. I know it's been a very busy involvement to date. I understand that she's having another meeting this afternoon. So Marion, thank you for your involvement at that level, and I'll hand the meeting over to you now.
Thank you, Kevin. And before we get into the bushfire response, I just want to check in with you all about the directory. And I know that we've been going through some very difficult times, and I'm sure that they're going to get harder before they get easier. But along with planning for the world to be a little different after COVID-19, we're also planning for some things to remain the same. One of these is our annual update of the club's directory. So all of our club members should have received an email from Joe asking us to update our details for that directory. Could you please take a moment, maybe after the lunch today, to follow Joe's instructions and to go online and update your information? It shouldn't take very long. If you're having any difficulty, there are also some additional instructions in the email on how you can send your details back to either Joe or Marg Lesser. And I think Marg's on the hookup today. She's going to update that information for you and make sure that the updated information is both in the online directory and in the hard copy directories that everybody will get. If any of you have any questions, please just ask Joe or Marg Lesser. I'm now just going to share my screen. Hopefully this works, and hopefully we've got it set up appropriately. just so that you can see where you can access the chat room. I don't know, is everybody seeing the screen? Yes? This is just one of the key photographs that came out of the bushfire that seems so long ago, but was actually only a few months ago. Down the bottom of your computers, and if you've got an iPad, it'll be up the top, you'll see this little icon called chat. If you click on that icon and have a question that you want to ask, I'd invite Reg to just monitor those chat questions, and at the end of our discussion today, we'll tap into some of those questions and any other questions that people may have. So I'm just going to introduce our panel for today. Our presenters are each going to share their stories, and they've all been involved in different ways to the bushfire response. First of all, we're going to have Mark Humphreys, who is our District Governor-elect for 9820, to tell us about how the district itself is faring. Bob Glindeman from DIK is going to let us know how it's impacted DIK and how the shipment of face masks in particular was dealt with. I'm going to give you a brief update on the district bushfire breakfast and the funds that have been raised so far and the district response. Jim Orchard, who's been working very closely with us, is going to give an update on the project that he's been involved with and in supporting District 9800 and helping to deliver a Melbourne response. And we've been guided throughout this in all that we do by the principle from the last bushfires, which is around delivering where there's a well-specified need rather than assuming this. And that need has been changing a bit over time. So firstly, I'd like to invite Mark Humphreys, District Governor-elect for 9820, to tell us about some of the challenges that they've experienced and how they've been working on the bushfire response. That district encompasses Rotary clubs from the Mornington Peninsula to East Gippsland. So over to you, Mark.
Lovely, thank you, Marion. And thank you, President Kevin, for this opportunity to speak with you guys. One thing I'd just like to start and say, yes, our district has certainly been impacted by the fires this year, but a lot of what we do, and good old Victoria, we always seem to have fires somewhere. So a lot of what I'm going to say today affects us today. We've still got the Western districts who have had their time in the fire. We've got the northern part of the state. So every part of Victoria gets touched. So today, yes, we are focusing on the East Gippsland area. And just cast your minds back again a little bit further than the end of last year. Central Gippsland had the fires. This year, sort of moved from central more down to the eastern part. So, yeah, we have copped it rough in the last 12 months. But just a little bit of more background. East Gippsland, as with other parts of Victoria, have also been suffering the green drought for several years. And that has really put a lot of stress on our vegetation and our communities and our farmers and that as well. So they were doing it tough to start with, and we all know a lot of the drought relief stuff. We've all seen the hay drives and that we've done and getting that down to the communities. And that has been hugely gratefully received and accepted. And as recently as February, we've had trucks of hay being shipped down to the place. The fires came, and you've all seen the horrific images that have been broadcast on all the different news medias. Radio, television, newspaper, local papers, Facebook, all of that sort of stuff has really shown the devastation. And the picture that was on the Marion's desktop is just one of those horrific images that we've seen. conversely, if you go and do a hunt around, you can actually see how magnificent nature really is, because very quickly after the fires, the green shoots started to reappear, and there's some photography. I was trying to get some pictures to share with you today, but they haven't come through, of just, you know, a blackened tree with this lush green shoot coming out of it. So the bush is repairing itself, but we have to look at how we can repair our communities. We discovered very, very early on in the fires that this was going to be something out of the ordinary, because it was coming down from the north, southern New South Wales, and it was coming down into us, and ours were moving up, and it eventually formed into that massive mega blaze. Pearl Finlay Jones, which I know you guys have been dealing with, Rotary Club of Bairnsdale, the current president, she immediately got on to District Governor Adrian and said, we have to be on the front foot. And so Pearl and Adrian enlisted past District Governor Jan Spears, and they immediately formed the emergency relief for the fires in that area. Not just one Rotary Club, but 4 or 5 of the Rotary clubs in the East Gippsland area. Just before the fires and everything started last year, my wife and I actually went down to Bruthen, which was very well spoken about in the press. And we went to hold a pre-pets down there. And we were sitting on the beer garden deck out the back and just looking at how magnificent it was. And recently we saw a picture of where we were sitting and what we were looking at, this beautiful lush green area with a river flowing through, blackened. And that really brought it home to Linda and I as to how much damage and how quickly it all happened. But we moved forward a couple of weeks, and next thing you know, as the DGs do, we ended up in San Diego. And we all know when Rotary programs something, the program doesn't change. Well, guess what? At the IA Assembly, Rotary actually changed their programming and put a plea across to all the governor-elects that were there, and they had a 5-minute spot about the fire situation in Australia and urging other governors to come and get in contact with us. And thousands, tens of thousands of dollars was poured from the various districts around the world into the fire relief. You know, a lot directly to Bairnsdale, a lot to the fire relief group in New South Wales, and a lot of cash came into Rorke's as well. So for RI to actually change the programming of event really means that it was hitting home with a lot of people. And then a couple of weeks later, guess what happened? The rains came. Blackened ground, no undergrowth. What happens with the water? It just runs, and sheets of water just pour and flood across, you know, stuff that people are just trying to get a handle on. Grey smoke, ash, silty water just flooding all through the place. But, you know, as we do, we just pick ourselves up and we get going again. And the fire relief group that were down there were at the forefront of that every time. Sure, at the beginning, they were just doing sandwiches or getting water out to the people that were there, but they were also collecting data and information of the families that were greatly impacted. 2 of the Rotarians from the Rotary Club of Orbost lost everything. They live down in Malakuta, and they travel up to Orbost for their Rotary meetings. So, you know, it really touched home with us. And then all through that time, what's lurking around in the background? We're all hearing at the beginning of January, February, this thing called COVID-19. And all of a sudden, bang, that's come and hit the entire country this time. And when you hear people from Macleod, Bruthen, the East Gippsland area saying, what have we done wrong? You've really got to start to wonder, wow, they're hurting. They're country people, and we all know country people can be pretty tough on the outside, but really underneath, they are just human people like us, and they are really, really struggling. So the fire relief group doesn't find itself just looking after fire and fire recovery. All the clubs around Australia, and I know Rotary Club of Melbourne particularly, have been a huge supporter of that committee, pouring lots of money and donations, containers and all those sorts of things down there, and that is greatly appreciated. The committee is looking at, well, we're now trying to help people after the rains. We're now trying to help communities with what we can and when we can in the lockdown period. They're still doing stuff, but that's all very limited at the moment. So, Rotary isn't the first responder. As much as we'd like to think we are, and we should get all the kudos, but Rotary, we are people that make the difference. We're the people that are going to go in there once this recovery is really up and going. Rotary is going to be there for the long haul. A lot of the first responders are going to get there, get the work done, get the communities back up and running, and then it's over to us, because we're the people that change people's lives. We are the people. Our little mottos, our themes for each year say it all. And at the moment, Rotary connects. Wow, boy, are we connecting! And I think I've got a pretty good theme for next year. Rotary opens opportunities. I challenge you not to find an opportunity in one of our disaster-stricken areas, and let's just continue the great work that we're doing in changing people's lives. That is just a very high overview of what East Gippsland is currently in. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much for that, Mark. We certainly feel for our colleagues in District 9820, and that update really puts into stark relief the challenges that they're faced with. I'd now like to invite past President Bob Glindeman to give us an update on the challenges that he's experienced at DIK and the work that he and his team have done so far to support some of the bushfire affected areas. So over to you, Bob.
Thanks, Marion. It's been very interesting to listen to Mark and understand what challenges they have faced down in Gippsland. And in mid-January, when Reg received that fateful phone call from the Rotary Club of Santa Barbara and talked about masks, that really was quite a surprise. And then the Rotary organisation swung into action. In mid-January, we received 25 pallets, that's 80-odd thousand N95 masks from disaster relief for distribution into the fire areas, to the fire brigade, to the various peoples down there that needed them. These pallets were distributed far and wide by DHL as part of the arrangement with disaster relief. 10 days later, a further 25 pallets arrived at donations in kind, and another 25 directly into Sydney. So that was 75 pallets, some 250,000 masks that were to be distributed into the fire areas. All of the work done by DHL from the donations in kind store and from a depot in Sydney was arranged by disaster relief and the Rotary Club as part of their contribution. So it was pretty significant. Those pallets were spread far and wide into the fire area. So all in all, some 200,000 masks were dispatched. Now, a small stock remains at DIK, and they're being held a disaster relief specific request pending issue into the medical areas where there is clearly a developing need for them. These N95 masks are the things that have been in short supply, but that's all being coordinated by disaster relief with the Department of Health and Human Services. We know that there are some boxes still floating around the countryside, and one of the things that we'd like to know is where they are. It's quite possible that they'll stay where they are and be issued to some medical organisations in those locations. But if they're not going to be issued and not used effectively, we'd obviously like them back so that they can then be issued where they're most necessary. So that's one of the things that we've done as far as the masks are concerned. And we get inundated at DIK with requests for them all the time. It's very hard to say no constantly, but we are. Now, in addition to the masks, there's a variety of other things that have been emerging out of DIK. We've got a number of pallets of hardware items from a hardware store that is closed. You know, I don't think anybody is surprised at the things that turn up at DIK unannounced. But these pallets of hardware materials were from a hardware store, and they'll all be used somewhere in the rebuilding process and will all be available to move down into that fire area. Similarly, we have a pallet of nails. Pallet is a code for lot. Also from another hardware organisation who changed their supplier of nails. Couldn't get rid of the ones they had, so they gave them to us. I think they'll find their way down into Gippsland as well. We've got cartons of tools that have been gathered over the past couple of months from projects that had started to gather them. The projects fell through and they're still at donations in kind. And we've been talking with the folk down in 9820 with past District Governors Jan and Charlie Spears from Traralgon, together with other Rotarians down there, to organise a vehicle to collect and take these back to the designated spot for sorting and collecting, sorting and allocation. Bed linen. We've got quite a bit of brand new boxed and sorted in the store. It'd be very easy for us to send this straight out into the fire areas, but I think in the conversations that I've had with Jan and Charlie, it needs to be appropriately managed and not just spread to the four winds, so that we make sure it gets to the people that really need it, rather than just simply handed out. And I think, as Mark would attest, immediately after the fire, they had more used clothing than they could possibly manage. And we don't want to see this ending up in that same situation. So that'll be handed specifically by the Rotarians down in that area. We've also got a fairly significant supply, I think it was 11 pallets, came over from South Australia of laundered linen from two of the WA mining camps we've had previously. That too is able to be utilised, and that can be handed out in much the same way. Now, the donations in kind store, because of all of the current restrictions, is closed. So we'll have to put in place specific arrangements to open the store, make sure there's a forklift driver there to load the pallets and so forth when these things need to be distributed. And we'll continue to liaise with the group down in 9820 to put that into effect. So it's a busy time at DIK, even though we're closed. The emails continue, the phone calls continue, and the offers continue to flow in. Thanks, Marion.
Well, thank you for that, Bob. The sort of continuous work that DIK does is both extraordinary and one of the best examples of Rotary in action. I'd now like to give the group a quick update on the District 9800 Bushfire Committee and the response to the bushfires that it's undertaken. So very quickly after the bushfire tragedy itself unfolded, DG Grant Hocking and DG Philip Archer pulled together a district coordinating committee, which consisted of both Grant and Philip, along with Sue Foley, Jim Studebaker, Rhys Maggs and myself. In the earlier Black Saturday bushfire, Jim Studebaker had actually been the DG at the time on a committee with Philip Archer and also with Rhys Maggs, who had been the CEO of SES. And he had been chair of the committee at the time, was Mev Connell, who also played a very significant part and has continued to give enormous input into this committee as we've drawn on his expertise. So together, this committee planned, first of all, the Bushfire Breakfast. That was with the enormous support of a number of other clubs, including Lily Tickman, Fabienne Nicola, Sandy Fulcher, and Liam Jones. The breakfast was held at the Hyatt at Essendon, and a number of us attended that. And it was staged with the keynote speaker being the Emergency Services Commissioner, Andrew Crisp. And he shared a number of slides, which I'd like to share with you now, because I think in these slides you can see in a snapshot what happened during the bushfire. So you can see that when the bushfire hit, they were preceded by the lowest rainfall on record in Australia. The highest temperature on record for Australia, which was 2 centigrade above the average. And it was above normal fire potential for most of the eastern Australia. Andrew oversaw all of this, and he had quite a dynamic slide, which I didn't choose to share today, that shows how quickly the bushfire spread throughout the state. And it was the first time in history that temperatures reached 49 degrees at Malakuta on the 30th of December, 2019. So as we were all preparing for our New Year's festivities, they were hitting the highest temperatures ever. And I'll share the next slide with you, which just, I have got this. Sorry, I didn't think I had this slide. This quickly shows you, no, it's not going to work for me. This is where the bushfires ended up having an impact. And his presentation was both excellent and insightful, recognizing the long-term impact that these traumas cause from his earlier experience with earlier bushfires, especially the mental health issues, which we've been focusing on quite a bit in our club, and the need to engage with the community closely to understand their actual needs rather than assuming what these needs are. And as a result of that, the committee has taken it slowly in working through what the actual needs of the community nearby have. So Andrew shared many of the learnings from the earlier bush fires, along with the experiences of Mev Connell, Jim Studebaker and Rhys Maggs, taking into account that longer term view. The event did have a lighter moment. We had Sue Foley and Andrew Watts do a bit of a Celtic sing-along. But the fundraising was supported by a number of other sponsors as well, including the Bendigo Bank, who was our platform for receiving all of the funds. And we raised 680,000 out of that, along with another 400,000 that have been offered by CUB publicans. The donations also came from some individual companies, and a number of those I think ended up with Bob Glindeman, including pallets of Nescafe, I think, and a number of products from Wink that included sanitizers and face masks. After the fundraising event, the committee then started to work on behalf of the affected areas, and key amongst the need in most of these areas were containers. Jim and Rhys have been overseeing the delivery of containers to affected areas, and these are so that people can protect their valuable belongings. They're not meant to be lived in. To date, we've provided 42 containers. 34 of those have gone to Gippsland and 8 to the Hume area, and there are another 7 that have been allocated there. Swire Group have also come to the party with a number of cheaper containers. And as I said, there to provide the security for people in these areas not meant to be lived in. Some of the other plans to engage with the Rotary clubs and deliver hands-on support has been affected by the COVID-19, obviously. The measures of social distancing have meant that we need to be very careful about how we support them. And whilst the COVID-19 has taken much of our collective attention in recent weeks, our committee has continued to work to ensure that the victims of both the drought and the bushfires are not forgotten. In fact, many are doubly hard hit because they're affected not only by the bushfires and, as Mark said, the floods thereafter, but also the pandemic. And separately, our club has been looking for a suitable project to work with the district on and one of those has been the relocation of caravans. So these areas are heading into winter now, and they need some help with shelter. So Philip Archer has organised some caravans, and Jim Orchard has been taking the lead on this project on behalf of Melbourne. And although it's taken a few twists and turns, he's been very focused on what the communities need and has had a lot of conversations with those communities, and he's made some changes as a result of the COVID-19. So I'd now like to hand over to Jim Orchard to give us a little bit more of an understanding of the project that Melbourne has been working on. And I'll stop sharing my slides. Jim? Oh, there you go.
Okay, just unmute myself. Thank you, Marion. So my main focus over the last month or so, I guess, is based around 14 caravans that Peter Davis's brother Ken has offered as potential replacement housing for bushfire victims. So I think first item on my little section of the presentation is to thank Peter and especially Ken for their very kind and generous donation. The second point is to emphasise what's been said before, that we're working with local Rotary people in bushfire impacted areas who are identifying specific individuals who need these caravans. So you've heard Pearl Finlay James' name a couple of times. So she has lots of Rotary people talking to her, one of whom is me. So she has identified two individuals that are suitable candidates for caravans, one at Cann River and one in a small community that's just outside of Bairnsdale. So the vans we have available to us have been used for on-site accommodation, and they're not currently able to be taken onto the open road. So the issue then for us is really a sort of transportation issue. So there's really two broad options. I'm certainly happy if people have got some other ideas to float in, but I guess what we're looking at is either to arrange trucking to get them there, and that would get them there in probably lots of 3 and 4. It requires a crane or a forklift or something at both the sort of loading end and at the unloading end, which makes it a little bit, or adds some complexity to that particular option. And the other way we can go, which we're sort of leaning towards, is to spend money to do some remedial work to make the vans sort of roadworthy so they can be towed by volunteers, particularly once we get outside the sort of corona social distancing world. We can find volunteers willing to tow them up to Bairnsdale and take them to their final sort of destination. So as I said, we're leaning towards that second option at the moment, even though one could end up with a sort of hybrid of the two approaches. So certainly for those first two caravans, we're looking at spending a few dollars to make them roadworthy, which is around tyres and a bit around brakes and some, and also to have a gas fitter look at the cooking facilities that are inside them, inside the caravans, that is. I guess one of the pieces of logic that leads us to go in that direction is that if we donate something that's not able to be taken on the road, potentially it creates a challenge for the recipient down the track if they can't move it or donate it on to somebody else. So I think having it being sort of roadworthy and able to go on the road without any great drama, obviously with the right vehicle and people with experience, I think that's a better way to go. I've been working with one of Bob and myself's regular colleagues at DIK, who's an experienced caravanner. So he's been very helpful with me, and also been in contact several times with Ken Davis. So between the three of us, we have a plan. But if there are experienced caravan folks sort of online, or you know somebody, certainly happy to, now that I have a plan, to sort of run that by people just to make sure it makes sense. I certainly don't want to have a fatal flaw in what we're thinking about doing. So in an ideal world, what we'd be doing now would be going down to Mornington, which is where the caravans are, and doing a bit of site inspection, and someone could explain to me all the things that need to be done. It's not really my field of expertise, but at the moment with the corona lockdowns, etc., we're doing the best we can over the phone and looking at photographs and what have you. So it's been a bit clunky, but you've got to do what you can do in the current situation. So I've mentioned money a few times, either to transport by trailer or to fix up the caravans. I mean, not for an individual caravan, it's not a huge amount of money. So what we're going to do is tap into some of the money that has been raised at the district level. So that's, I guess, in broad terms, the money that Marion mentioned a little bit earlier. So I will be on a call, I guess, with Marion this afternoon, in perhaps an hour's time, to talk with the district bushfire coordination team. We have submitted an application for some funding under that with that group. So once those funds are approved, we'll be getting the remediation done on 2 of the vans so they're ready to roll as we move forward. Another thing that, whilst we've got the group together here, is that I certainly understand in the current climate, it's not appropriate to ask for volunteers to try and drive across the state and risk getting a fine. But if people have got the right vehicle and are interested in at the appropriate time towing a caravan to Bairnsdale or somewhere sort of close to that, if they could shoot me an email, I'll certainly get back to them, and I'd like to get a list of people who are, at least in theory, potentially able to do that. One other activity I was exploring before we sort of got locked down was volunteering for Blaze Aid. I know that the Rotary Club of, I think it was Camberwell, did a group of them went and did a long weekend, perhaps with the Blaze Aid group. But for those not familiar with Blaze Aid, they are, and I'm quoting here from their website, a volunteer-based organisation that works in rural Australia after natural disasters such as fires and floods. That's not me. Working alongside rural families, volunteers help to rebuild fences and other structures that have been damaged or destroyed. So it's very much a sort of hands-on type of work. And it's done in sort of camps. So they set up a group of people and they'll work, I guess some long days. I'm still keen to explore that sort of on behalf of the club, whether we do it as a club activity or in conjunction with another club. But it's Blaze Aid have locked down their activities given the corona situation, but I'm sure they will open up again, and I'll explore to see whether that's something that might be appropriate for the club to get involved in. So that's all from me, Marion.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jim, Bob and Mark. And we're going to go to Mark for some final comments. But before we do, if anybody does have a question, if you could just raise your hand, I'll get to you to pose that question. Reg will share with us a question from Robert Fisher, which I think is probably targeted directly at Mark, so that will be ideal. And Jim, we've already got some people online who are able to help you, including from Bev Brock, who suggests that she might be able to get some tyres supplied from Bridgestone if you can give her the right sizes. So there's quite a lot of support coming in for your activities, Jim, on the chat room. We'll record that and make sure that you get it if we don't get to each of the items on there. But over to you, Mark, just to summarise the efforts that are going into supporting the bushfire areas.
Yeah, thank you, Marion. Look, from a personal level, I just cannot thank you guys enough. Not just you, but Rotary in general. We are doing an amazing job. As I said earlier, we're not the first responders, but we are the people that are there for the long haul. And one of the things that has concerned me a little bit is I've heard a few clubs around that are saying, oh, well, we're not going to give as much money to foundation this year because we're going to give all the money to the fire relief and the drought relief funds and stuff. And I'm trying to change that actual attitude, because in 2 and 3 and 4 years' time, when the recovery is well underway, communities have their parks are being rejuvenated, schools are getting their facilities back in order, clubs are going to want us to be helping them with district grants and things. So I'm not looking at what we're doing today. I'm really trying to encourage clubs to keep up that giving to foundation, increase that giving to foundation, because in 2, 3, 4, 5 years' time, you're all going to be coming to your leaders and saying, we want to do something in this community, because a lot of the work that we've done has been burnt to the ground. So now somehow we have to replace that. So again, just, bear in mind, we're there for the long haul. So on all of that, thank you very much for your support. It is greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Mark. And over to Reg for, if you could pose Robert's question. Or is Robert there? Is Robert there? Would you like to pose your question, Robert?
Thanks, Marion. I think it's on the chat room there, but really I was wondering if we have any specific plans afoot for identifying and responding to community needs for trauma relief. This is thinking longer term, I understand that, but I'm just wondering if there's any specific thinking going into getting that in place.
So I think over to you, Mark.
Yes, thank you, Barry, and thank you, Robert. Look, that is a question I will certainly have to take on notice. I know a lot of the mental health side of things is really just starting to come to the fore now, and I do know that District Governor Adrian and District Governor, or past District Governor Jan Spears, have certainly got that front of their thinking. I do also know that both Pearl and Jan and the rest of the committee are formulating as quickly as they can real plans, real needs, so that our resources are targeted in exactly the right places. As Bob said earlier, we just don't want to dump stuff on people and then for them to say, well, yeah, we do have too many clothes. That is not good use of our time. It's not good use of our facilities. So we are trying to work through all of the issues as they come to hand. And I will certainly get Jan and Pearl to get some of those formulated plans, and I'll send them directly to you either through Marion or through Kevin.
Any other questions? Hands up if you have a question. Any questions? Just a quick one, probably for you again, Mark. The pandemic, how has that been affecting these communities as well? Have they been suffering in quite the same way as the cities?
Yes, they have been suffering in very similar ways. I think their suffering is just compounded because it's just another thing for them. That they were kicked out of their local homes and communities and shuffled away. They were trying to get back into their homes or to see what was left of their homes in some cases. And now this whole lockdown, they're being told, go to your home. I don't have a home. So they are really suffering. And that's why we're really got to put a big focus now on that mental health side of things and just do what we can. As I said, we're the people that change people's lives. We've got a lot of the resources. We can help.
Any other questions? Reg, any questions in the chat room that you think we should?
Pretty much all the questions that have come up in the chat room have been answered, but one of the things I just wanted to highlight was that there have been some quite significant volunteering offers made by people, and I just wanted to assure everyone that we actually can reproduce a copy of all the comments, so you will be followed up on that offer for sure. And secondly, to say with a total of 74 people online today at this meeting, I'm just rapt that we've managed to reach so many people so rapidly. So from my viewpoint, thank you everyone for being here. And I think the platform has been very kind to us. From where I'm sitting, the sound and the video quality has been exceptional. And Marion, you've helped us to raise this to a new standard by sharing some stunning visuals. So thanks for that, as well as for your chairmanship.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to thank our panel on behalf of the Zoom team. It's amazing what a number of quiet achievers we have in Rotary in Action. Can you join me with just a gentle clap to our panel? Thank you. Over to you, Kevin.
Thank you, Marion, and thank you, panel, and thank you to everyone who's joined us today. It really shows that we're aiming to keep our Rotary wheel moving, and of course focusing on delivering the humanitarian services that we are very capable of doing and very well known for doing. Great to be able to resonate with District Governor-elect Mark Humphreys. Mark has been on the R100 team for some time with Hugh Bucknell and many of us, and I guess, Mark, we just can put all that aside for the moment and focus perhaps on what we need to do now, which is, of course, the topic of today, plus dealing with COVID-19, and then look forward to 2021 when we can actually celebrate the centenary of Rotary. But in the meantime, we're delivering via Zoom. We've learned how to do it. Reg said exactly, we've raised the bar. Thank you, Marion, today. The work you've put into it is terrific. We want to maintain that work. Our committees are meeting via Zoom. They're keeping their work going. And of course, we certainly have the backup support of Joe Mavris, who's now moved the Rotary office and kept us in the manner we like to be accustomed to keep that Rotary wheel going. So thank you, Joe. Mention was made of past President Mev Connell, and certainly the lessons of mental health have been well recorded, and Mev particularly has been front and centre since the day one of these bushfires to remind us of the outcomes, the good work that was done over the decade since Black Saturday. And Mev will be installed as an honorary member in due course when we have the opportunity to all be together again. And we look forward to that day, but in the meantime, we rely on the internet. We will be meeting each week at 1 o'clock as normal, and we'll be connecting to as many as we can. We have the Angus Mitchell oration coming up on the 29th of April. We have other speakers in the pipeline, and certainly we want to keep our members engaged. And if anyone feels disengaged, they only have to pick up the phone, give me a call, or give Marion a call, or anyone else they know a call. And certainly we'll be able to help them in any way we can. I would like to thank Dominica from Rotary Club of Montego Bay for being online today, and we particularly wish you well and give our greetings back to your club. I
certainly will. It's been very, very interesting. I've found it very interesting indeed.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Thank you. You seem a world away, but we're all connected by the same desire to get healthy again and get the world moving again. So yes. Keep in touch, please.
Yes. Yes, I will.
Thank you. It's been said today by Mark, by Marion, and by Bob, and by Jim that Rotary connects. And boy, haven't we connected enough number of dots today, from face masks to caravans to tools to the fundraising. It's been terrific to hear and learn more about what has been happening. We also take your message, Mark, to heart in relation to the foundation. That has been echoed in other meetings that I've attended, including a Zoom meeting with World President Mark Maloney only a week ago, and our District Governor only a week ago as well. So in closing the meeting today, thank you everyone for being on board, particularly thanking our presenters. It's another way that we can show Rotary Melbourne leading the field as we do each week, and certainly we look forward to seeing you online next week at 1 o'clock. Thank you, good afternoon, and keep safe and spread happiness. Goodbye.
Thanks,
Cheers,
everyone.
Kevin.
Bye all.